Chosen one. There comes a season in your life that feels unfamiliar at first, almost uncomfortable, because everything inside you begins shifting in a quieter direction. You may notice that you no longer feel the same urge to explain yourself to everyone around you. Situations that once pulled you into long conversations or emotional debates no longer carry the same energy. Instead of responding immediately, something within you encourages you to pause, watch, and listen more carefully. At first, this shift can feel confusing because the world often rewards constant communication. People expect quick responses, immediate explanations, and visible reactions to everything happening around you. But the season you are entering is different. It is a training season where the most important growth does not come from speaking more, but from learning the discipline of silence. Many chosen ones experience this shift without fully understanding why it happens. They simply begin noticing that they are less interested in arguing, less motivated to defend themselves, and less willing to explain their intentions to people who have already decided what they believe. Instead of constantly clarifying your position, you start observing patterns. You watch how people behave over time, rather than focusing on what they say in the moment. You notice that silence reveals far more information than constant conversation ever could. This is what many people call the season of silence. In daily life, it looks simple, but its effects are powerful. You stop explaining every decision. You stop reacting to every comment or criticism. You stop trying to control how others interpret your actions. Instead, you allow your presence to become quieter and more intentional. The silence you practice is not passive or empty, it is purposeful. It creates space for observation, reflection, and deeper understanding. What makes this season challenging is that others may not immediately understand the change.
When you speak less than before, people sometimes assume something is wrong. They may wonder why you seem more reserved, or why you are no longer engaging in conversations the way you used to. But what they are seeing is not withdrawal, it is refinement. Silence becomes a tool that allows you to see situations with greater clarity. When you stop responding to every opinion, you begin noticing how people behave when they are not receiving immediate reactions from you. Their intentions, patterns, and motivations slowly reveal themselves. This is one of the reasons silence is such a powerful teacher. When you're constantly speaking, you often fill the space that could reveal someone else's character. When you remain quiet, the space remains open long enough for the truth to appear. In many ways, this quiet season functions as a form of spiritual training. Instead of relying on constant expression, you begin developing discernment. Discernment is the ability to see beneath surface behavior and recognize deeper patterns. It grows stronger when your mind is not overwhelmed by constant explanation and emotional reaction. Silence also strengthens discipline. Each moment where you choose not to react immediately builds greater control over your words and emotions. This discipline protects your peace because it prevents other people's behavior from dictating your responses. Over time, you start recognizing that speaking less does not make you weaker. In fact, it often makes your presence more powerful. When your words become more intentional, people begin listening more carefully when you do speak. Silence also sharpens your sense of timing. Not every situation requires an immediate response. Some moments require patience, observation, and distance before the right words appear. During this season, you begin learning that wisdom often comes from waiting rather than reacting.
The ability to hold your words until the moment is right becomes one of the most valuable skills you can develop. What once felt like restraint eventually becomes strategy. You start recognizing that speaking less protects your energy, your focus, and your emotional balance. The noise of unnecessary conversations fades, allowing your mind to become clearer and more focused on what truly matters. This quiet transformation may feel strange at first, because it separates you from habits that once felt normal. But over time, you begin seeing the purpose behind it. The silence is not isolation, it is preparation. It is a period where your awareness becomes sharper, your discipline becomes stronger, and your judgment becomes more reliable. Instead of constantly explaining yourself to the world, you begin listening more deeply to your own intuition and to the patterns unfolding around you. And as this season continues, you gradually realize that silence is not something to fear or avoid. It is one of the most powerful tools you can develop on your path. A tool that protects your energy while teaching you how to observe the world with greater wisdom and clarity. Chosen one. Once you enter the season of silence, the next realization slowly begins forming inside you. This quiet shift is not random. It arrives with purpose. What may first feel like withdrawal or detachment is actually a form of preparation. There are specific reasons why life begins pulling you towards speaking less and observing more, and most of those reasons revolve around protection, clarity, and power. The first reason this season appears is protection. When you speak constantly about your plans, emotions, frustrations, and next moves, you unknowingly give the world access to information that can be used against you. Most people do not intend to harm you, but information travels in ways that are impossible to control once it leaves your mouth. The more openly you narrate your journey, the more material others have to analyze, judge, repeat, or even weaponize. Over time, you begin noticing how quickly conversations about your goals turn into opinions, advice, or criticism. Some individuals listen with genuine curiosity, but others collect details about your direction simply because proximity to your life interests them. In a noisy environment where everyone has access to your thoughts, your focus becomes scattered. Silence interrupts that pattern. When you stop announcing every step of your life, you quietly remove the access points that once existed. Your plans remain protected, your emotional reactions remain private, and the space around your growth becomes harder for others to influence. Privacy becomes a form of safety. In this sense, silence is not secrecy, it is protection. It allows your ideas to develop before they are exposed to the opinions of people who may not understand them. The simple truth behind this stage of growth is that privacy is protection. When fewer people know the details of your journey, fewer people can interfere with the direction it takes. The second reason this quiet season arrives is clarity. When your life is filled with constant explanation and conversation, your attention is divided between your own thoughts and everyone else's reactions. Every time you speak, you naturally begin monitoring how your words are received. You consider whether people understand you, whether they agree with you, and whether you should clarify your meaning further. This constant narration creates noise inside your mind. Your thoughts become tangled with the expectations and interpretations of the people around you. But when you begin speaking less, something unexpected happens. The noise begins fading. Without the pressure to explain everything, your mind gains space to observe. You start noticing details that once passed by unnoticed. You see patterns in people's behavior, subtle changes in tone, and small inconsistencies that reveal deeper truths about situations. Your intuition becomes stronger because it is no longer competing with endless conversation. Many people underestimate how powerful this shift can be. Your inner voice cannot compete with constant explanation. When the environment around you becomes quieter, your awareness becomes sharper. This is why silence often leads to insight. Instead of trying to manage how others perceive you, your attention returns to understanding what is actually happening. The clarity that emerges during this stage allows you to make better decisions because you are seeing reality more accurately. You begin responding to patterns rather than reacting to individual moments. The third reason this season of silence arrives is power. Every reaction you give away carries energy with it. When someone provokes you and you respond immediately, they gain influence over your emotional state. When criticism appears and you rush to defend yourself, the conversation becomes controlled by the pressure of that moment. Over time, this pattern creates a cycle where other people's actions determine your reactions. Silence interrupts that cycle. By pausing before responding, you reclaim authority over your emotions. Instead of reacting instantly, you create a space between the stimulus and your response. That space is where power lives. In that brief pause, you decide whether the situation deserves your attention or whether it is better left unanswered. Learning to regulate your reactions transforms the way people interact with you. When others realize they cannot easily provoke a reaction, many attempts to control the conversation disappear. Emotional discipline changes the entire dynamic because your responses are no longer predictable. Self-control becomes a quiet form of authority.
People who once expected immediate reactions begin realizing that your attention is not automatically available. This shift may seem small, but its impact is profound. When you are no longer reacting impulsively, you begin responding intentionally. Your words carry more weight because they are chosen rather than triggered. Over time, this combination of protection, clarity, and power transforms your entire approach to communication. The silence you once feared becomes a strategic tool that protects your growth, sharpens your perception, and strengthens your ability to remain steady in situations that once pulled you into emotional noise. And as this quiet discipline develops, you start discovering the deeper reward of speaking less, the ability to see what others miss. Chosen one. As you continue moving through this quiet season where you speak less and observe more, a new kind of awareness begins forming inside you. At first, the change feels subtle, almost like a shift in the background of your thinking. But over time, it becomes clear that silence is teaching you something powerful. When you stop reacting to every moment, you start seeing patterns instead of isolated events. Most people evaluate situations based on single conversations or temporary emotions. They forgive quickly because someone apologized, or they trust quickly because someone said the right words. But when you are observing quietly rather than constantly participating, you begin noticing something deeper. Behavior repeats itself. The same reactions appear again and again under slightly different circumstances. Someone who lies once often lies again. Someone who avoids responsibility usually continues avoiding it. Someone who shows consistent integrity continues doing so even when it is inconvenient. Patterns reveal truths that words alone cannot hide. This is one of the most important lessons silence teaches you. When people speak, they often describe the version of themselves they want you to believe. When you watch their behavior over time, the truth becomes visible without any explanation. Patterns are the truth people cannot easily hide, because patterns appear through repetition. Once your attention shifts toward these repeated behaviors, you stop being easily persuaded by promises, apologies, or emotional speeches. You begin trusting what someone consistently does, rather than what they temporarily say. This change alone protects you from many of the misunderstandings and disappointments that once drained your energy. Silence also sharpens your ability to detect motives. When you are constantly talking, your attention focuses mainly on expressing your own thoughts. But when you listen more than you speak, the intentions behind other people's words start becoming clearer. You begin noticing the difference between questions that come from genuine curiosity and questions that come from quiet investigation. Some people ask about your life because they want to understand your journey. Others ask because they are collecting information. At first, those questions can sound identical, but the energy behind them eventually becomes recognizable when you observe carefully. Genuine supporters listen with encouragement and respect. They celebrate your growth without needing to know every detail about your next step. In contrast, individuals who are studying you rather than supporting you often ask questions that focus on specific strategies, plans, or opportunities. Their interest centers on what you are doing, rather than who you are becoming. Silence gives you the distance needed to notice these subtle differences. Instead of answering immediately and moving the conversation forward, you pause long enough to see how the other person interacts with the information they receive. Over time, you start recognizing which conversations are built on connection and which ones revolve around comparison, or curiosity that is not entirely supportive. Another lesson that emerges during this quiet season is the ability to recognize bait. Many social interactions contain small tests designed to provoke a reaction. Sometimes the bait appears as a subtle insult hidden inside humor. Other times it arrives as a comment that questions your intentions or your character. These remarks are often small enough to appear harmless, but pointed enough to trigger a response if you are emotionally invested in defending yourself. When you are used to reacting quickly, these moments can easily pull you into arguments or long explanations. Silence changes the outcome. By pausing instead of reacting immediately, you allow the bait to pass without engaging with it. The absence of your reaction often exposes the purpose behind the comment. People who rely on provocation lose interest when the response they expected never arrives. In this way, silence protects you from stepping into conversations that were never meant to lead anywhere productive. You begin realizing that not every statement requires a response, and not every challenge deserves your attention. Some situations reveal more truth when left unanswered. Perhaps the most valuable skill developed during this season is timing. When you speak less, you start understanding the difference between moments that require your voice and moments that are better left quiet. Timing becomes a form of wisdom because it allows you to choose when your words will have the greatest impact. There are situations where immediate action is necessary, but there are also moments where patience reveals more information than confrontation ever could. By observing first and speaking later, you learn how to address problems with greater precision. You recognize when a conversation will lead to resolution and when it will only create unnecessary conflict. Silence provides the space needed to evaluate those situations carefully. Over time, you stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally. This transformation changes the way people experience your presence. Your words become fewer, but they carry greater weight because they are chosen with awareness rather than emotion. As your ability to read patterns, motives, and hidden intentions grows stronger, the world around you begins making more sense. Situations that once felt confusing now appear predictable because you understand the behaviors driving them. And in that understanding, you gain a form of discernment that cannot be taught through constant conversation, but only through the quiet discipline of observation. Chosen one. Understanding the power of silence is one thing, but learning how to practice it in everyday life requires intention and discipline. Speaking less does not mean withdrawing from people or becoming emotionally distant. It means becoming more deliberate with your words and more aware of when your voice truly adds value to a situation. One of the most practical ways to begin this process is by developing what could be called the pause rule. The pause rule is simple but transformative. Instead of responding immediately to everything that is said to you, you allow a brief space to appear before your reply. That space may be only a few seconds, but it changes the entire dynamic of a conversation. When someone asks a question, challenges your decision, or makes a comment designed to provoke a reaction, you breathe and wait before speaking. This pause interrupts the automatic pattern of reacting emotionally. It allows your mind to evaluate whether the situation actually requires a response or whether silence would serve you better. In emotionally charged moments, that pause may need to become longer. Instead of replying immediately through messages or conversation, you may give yourself minutes or even hours before answering. Time has a way of clarifying situations that feel urgent in the moment. When you create distance between the stimulus and your response,
Your words become intentional rather than reactive. This simple habit alone can change the way you communicate because it places you back in control of your reactions instead of allowing the moment to control you. Another key part of the speakless discipline involves shortening the way you communicate. Many people who are naturally thoughtful feel the need to explain their entire perspective whenever they speak. They want to be understood clearly, so they provide context, emotions, and reasoning all at once. While this habit may come from sincerity, it often leads to unnecessary complexity in conversations. When you're practicing the quiet season, your goal becomes clarity rather than volume. Instead of offering long explanations, you answer the question that was asked and allow your response to remain simple. Shorter sentences create fewer openings for debate and fewer opportunities for your words to be misinterpreted or manipulated. When someone expects a long explanation and receives a calm, concise answer instead, the conversation often ends naturally. Over time, this approach becomes easier because you realize that your entire story does not need to be shared in every interaction. Not every conversation requires your full emotional transparency. Some moments simply require a clear and respectful response. As you begin speaking less, another important practice emerges: observing how people react to your quietness. Silence has a revealing effect on the environment around you. Individuals who respect boundaries usually adapt quickly to your more reserved communication style. They accept shorter responses, respect your pauses, and continue interacting with you in a healthy and balanced way. In contrast, people who rely on control often react differently. When your silence replaces the long explanations they once received, they may begin pushing harder for information or emotional reactions. Some escalate their questions, others introduce guilt or criticism, and some attempt to involve other people in the conversation to pressure you into speaking more than you intended. These reactions are not random. They reveal which individuals were comfortable with you when you were emotionally accessible, and which ones struggle when your communication becomes more controlled. In many cases, your silence becomes the moment where certain dynamics reveal themselves clearly. The absence of constant explanation removes the leverage that others once relied on. Practicing the quiet season also involves learning how to move privately. Many people feel pressure to share their plans while they are still developing. They talk about ideas, goals, and strategies long before those things have taken shape. While sharing can sometimes create encouragement, it can also expose fragile plans to opinions, doubt, and unnecessary scrutiny. When you move privately, you allow your work to develop before introducing it to the world. Instead of announcing every step of your journey, you focus on execution. Results speak far more clearly than unfinished intentions. When people eventually see what you have built, the conversation becomes about reality rather than speculation. This approach protects both your energy and your focus because you are no longer managing reactions to plans that are still forming. The final part of practicing silence is learning how to remain warm without becoming open access. Silence is not meant to make you cold or distant. Your kindness and respect toward others remain intact. What changes is the level of access people have to your thoughts, emotions, and plans. You can still smile, still listen, and still show care in your interactions. The difference is that you no longer feel obligated to reveal everything about yourself in every conversation. Boundaries exist alongside kindness, rather than replacing it. This balance allows you to maintain healthy relationships while protecting the focus required for your personal growth. Silence, when practiced correctly, becomes a strategy rather than a punishment. It creates a calm presence where your words are measured, your reactions are intentional, and your energy remains centered on the path you are meant to walk. And through that discipline, your quietness begins shaping the environment around you in ways that constant explanation never could. Chosen one. By the time you fully settle into this quiet season,
you begin understanding something that most people never realize until much later in life. Speaking less is not about shrinking yourself. It is about sharpening yourself. In a world where everyone feels pressure to constantly respond, constantly explain, and constantly prove their perspective, choosing silence becomes a form of strength. What begins as a small shift in communication gradually transforms the entire way you move through life. When you speak less, your attention moves outward instead of constantly pushing your thoughts into the world. You begin observing the environment around you with greater precision. Situations that once felt confusing become easier to understand because you are no longer distracted by the urge to defend your position or narrate your intentions. Observation turns into discernment, and discernment becomes one of the most valuable tools you can carry. Instead of reacting to every moment emotionally, you begin making decisions based on patterns you have carefully watched over time. This process naturally reduces mistakes because you are no longer acting on incomplete information. You see how people behave consistently, how circumstances develop gradually, and how timing often matters more than immediate reaction.
Over time, this awareness creates a quieter form of confidence. You stop feeling the need to rush your voice into every situation because you trust your ability to read what is happening before you respond. Another result of this season is stronger boundaries. Silence gives you the space to evaluate where your energy should go and where it should remain protected. When you were speaking constantly, it was easy for others to enter your life through conversation alone. Questions led to explanations. Explanations led to emotional investment. And suddenly, you found yourself carrying responsibilities that were never meant to belong to you. But when you become more selective with your words, those entry points begin disappearing. People who approach you must meet a different level of clarity and respect because they cannot rely on long conversations to slowly push their way into your attention. This shift does not isolate you from others. It refines the connections that remain. The relationships that continue are usually the ones built on mutual respect rather than emotional access. In those relationships, your presence feels lighter because the communication is honest and balanced rather than driven by constant explanation. Over time, you notice that fewer misunderstandings appear in your life simply because your boundaries are clearer and your words are used with greater intention. Silence also produces cleaner relationships. When you stop over-explaining and reacting impulsively, the dynamics around you begin revealing themselves. Some people adapt to your quiet presence naturally because they appreciate calm and thoughtful communication. Others feel uncomfortable because the silence removes the emotional reactions they once relied on. Those who depended on your constant responses may begin drifting away when they realize the environment has changed. While that shift can feel unsettling at first, it ultimately brings clarity. The people who remain in your life are the ones who value connection rather than control. Their presence feels stable because it does not depend on how much information or emotional reaction you provide. In this way, silence acts like a filter, gradually removing relationships that thrived on noise while strengthening the ones built on trust and understanding. Perhaps the most powerful result of this quiet discipline is the way it accelerates your personal elevation. When your mind is no longer consumed by unnecessary conversations and emotional reactions, you regain a tremendous amount of energy. That energy can now be directed toward your growth, your purpose, and the goals that truly matter to you. Your focus sharpens because your attention is no longer scattered across every comment or opinion that comes your way. Decisions become clearer because you are working from observation rather than impulse. Over time, the results of this quiet season begin speaking louder than any explanation you could have offered. People notice the stability in your presence, the clarity in your choices, and the consistency in your direction. What once looked like silence from the outside becomes visible as progress from the inside. The truth is that quiet seasons often build the loudest results.
While others are busy reacting to every moment, you are quietly learning how to observe, discern, and move with intention. And as this discipline becomes part of your life, a deeper understanding settles within you. You no longer feel the need to rush your voice into every conversation or defend every step you take. Instead, you move with patience, allowing wisdom and timing to guide your words. In that calm space, your life begins aligning with a rhythm that values clarity over noise, observation over reaction, and purpose over unnecessary explanation. If this message found you at the right moment, take it as a reminder that growth often happens in quiet seasons.
Support the channel by liking this video so more people can discover it. Share it with someone learning the power of observation, and subscribe for more insights on discernment, boundaries, and elevation. Comment, observe if you're in your quiet season.